the end of another day, and progress on the guards was exactly 0 because I got distracted making this monstrosity. The shrinker stretchers, when I bought them, didn't come with a stand, so I looked up how much a stand would cost, and I think to get one here would cost me about 400 or 500 New Zealand dollars. So I thought, well, let's see what I can just cobble together from the junk I've got in the shed here, because I've got a lot of tools and I've got lots of bits and pieces, and I think I've watched every episode of the A-Team at least 10 times, so I should be able to cobble something together. And this is what I came up with. So it is a bit agricultural, and some of the welding isn't my best, but it's solid, it won't fall apart. The main part of it was this tube, which actually came from my neighbour from underneath his defunct dairy shed. This was actually some sort of support, so it had a bent U-shaped piece of steel at the top here, which I was hoping to use, but it was all sort of wonky, so I ended up cutting that off. The legs are just 1-inch steel tubing, just welded to the bottom. I reused the brackets that I already had the shrinker stretchers attached to. I just kind of turn them around so they stick out past the bracket. And I welded another scrap of steel to the top of this tube, and this was actually box section that I chopped the top off for something. Can't even remember what now. So I just welded in another literally scrap piece of angle in there just to brace it back up. And for the pedals, they're just steel tube, and for the shaft I basically found another piece of tube, small piece of tube, and a piece of mild steel that I had to turn down slightly so those would fit over. It's all very loose and wobbly, it all needs greasing of course, and I just turned some little circlip grooves in the end, and once I clean all this up, I'll just put a little circlip there and that'll hold that in place. Everything, I just kind of winged it, so I didn't really measure anything. I did use old Plumb Bob square pants here just to kind of line up where the pedal needed to go underneath the hammer, just kind of like that. And the only other thing I really used was my imperial ruler, the one I can't read the measurements on. So everything is just really bashed together. And I was trying to figure out what to use for the linkages. I've got some stainless steel rod, but I couldn't think of a neat way of terminating the ends unless I sort of bend the ends over and drill out these collars. So my plan was just to use a piece of flat bar, sort of 1/2 inch flat bar, just straight down, but I didn't have any. So I've just temporarily used basically fencing wire. It's that number 8 wire there, which is what I'm going to use to wire the edges of the guards as well. I've got a massive roll of it, so it made sense to reuse that. The new handles are just little pieces of tube. Looks like that one is already bending, so I may need to change that for a piece of solid bar. Put a piece of solid bar up inside there. The ends are just little scraps of steel that I drilled and welded in place. And this was another piece of just box section scrap that I had with the nice curved corner. So I just cut off a couple of pieces of that and welded that to the things to make the pedal pads. And that's pretty much it. I do need to put some rubber feet on the bottom, and I do need some return springs because the weight of the pedal pulls it down. So I need a little spring at the bottom. I just don't have anything suitable, but it does work. You have to be a bit gentle with it, with this fencing wire, because if you're too hard, it'll just unbend it and it'll pull out. But you don't need to put too much force on it anyway. You can see the feet are a bit uneven, so it's moving, but once it's got little rubber feet on it, that'll take care of that. there's only so much force you can put on it anyway, because the jaws come together, of course. So once the jaws are together, any more pressure isn't going to do anything. It's just going to bend the mechanism. Like I say, 4 sort of rubber feet on either end of each leg will take out the wobble. But it definitely works. And it works reasonably well. Yeah, that's already bending. So, might need a few tweaks, and it obviously needs a clean up and a de-rusting, and I'll spray it with whatever paint I've got over there I want to get rid of that I'm not going to use for anything else. And of course now I've got another freestanding piece of equipment I need to find a place for, but that shouldn't be too bad. But yeah, I'm quite pleased with how it's come out. I am annoyed that's bending now. But yeah, a piece of anything up the inside of that to reinforce it will take care of that. I'll wait till it's completely finished before I upload this. So we can see what it ends up like. I think for the springs, what I'll do is just weld some washers onto here, just to give me a few attachment points. And I just need a spring with about 3-inch extension, I think. All of the springs I've got are too small. It might be another trip to the hardware shop just to get some flat stock rather, to make those linkages. Looking at this, it's definitely bent it. So already needing to start making improvements. But what I will do tomorrow is a rusty old piece of steel bar. Like I say, this thing's agricultural and made up with all the different little bits of scrap I could find. And I will turn this down and make some solid extensions to go in here, and I'll just mill this piece on the end flats, which is where the bolts go through. Like I say, this wire is just temporary, because if you do put too much force on it, it just unbends the wire. But, yeah, I think job for tomorrow. It's the next day. Should be working on the car. The weather's getting better, so I can go outside soon. I replaced my little handles with solid ones, and these are very solid because this is high tensile steel. I found a nicer length of steel bar that I had in my scrap bin. I think it's 4140, so turned those down, milled the flat, and it's just a 6mm bolt through there. And I realized for the tension rods I can just keep using the fencing wire. I just welded some little fender washers to it, and I think that'll be fine because it's all under tension, so I doubt those welds will break. And I found some almost close springs, not quite, although actually these aren't doing too badly. So I have just temporarily attached them with some cable ties. I did weld on some little washers, as you can see, just to hold the springs. They're just sort of tack welded in place. Just notice that one is a little bit. Just to get them straight, not that it matters. And apart from the feet on the bottom, because you can see it is rocking, it's sitting on the middle. I suspect, despite trying my best, I think I still managed to warp these when I welded them. But like I say, when they're sitting up on some little rubber blocks, it'll be much more stable. But it works pretty well now. I have ordered some springs. They're coming on the way from China because that was the cheapest place to get them from. And they are door closing springs. I think they were like $5 each. There is a company locally that sells this exact same stuff. They just get it drop shipped from China, but it's about 3 times the price. If you go to the hardware shops, you'd pay, it can be like $30, $40 for one spring. So even though I don't like doing it and it's bad for the planet and all that kind of thing, it's just cheaper to get them from China for some reason. But I was testing it out. This was a straight piece of aluminium. I just put through the shrinking dies a couple of times, and of course aluminium is very soft, so it's easy. And then theoretically, if you put it in the other side, you should be able to stretch it back out again. Of course, it's mangling the metal. I think this one isn't quite, yeah. My cable tie is a little bit loose there, so it's not returning all the way. I think you can see, you get the idea anyway. The reason I'm doing this with aluminium is because it's much easier, and because I have to hold the camera, I've only got one hand still. Of course, it mangles the edges of the metal, which is all stuff you have to then file or sand smooth again. But you can see that's more or less straight again. So I think this will work fine. Like I say, these are under tension. That might be what's happening. It's catching on these corners, so I may need to just radius those just to guide the bar into the right place. Or I can turn these around. I've got the bar sitting on this side off the washer. There's lots of little tweaks like that I need to do. I did just have a thought, instead of rubber feet, I could check my junk hose box and see if I've got a piece of probably radiator or heater hose, some sort of hose, rubber tube that I can just slip over the ends of the legs would be enough. But yeah, I think once the weather picks up a little bit, I can, I'll spray the whole thing down with the phosphoric acid metal prep and let it dry, and then just give it a coat of paint. There's return springs in here as well, so this spring, it just has to overcome gravity basically to let that come back up. So you don't need an especially strong spring there. But yeah, I think I'm going to call that pretty much done now. I need to, some parts of this I can paint separately. I could do that inside, so I might do that today. Just the little levers and things, just because otherwise everything's going to rust. But no, it's come out pretty well. Yeah, turning these around makes it sit a lot better. It's basically centralized. So that's the way around it can go. And I did test it on a piece of steel. I cut off one of my scrap guard sides, and people had asked in the comments about if you could just shrink the edge of that to actually get it into the right radius. And I was saying, I think if you tried that too much, it'll end up distorting the sides. This is what happens when you try to actually straighten that out, and it kind of makes sense. If you're shrinking this inside edge, this isn't going to pull in a tighter radius flat. It's going to also pull it sort of that way, which is exactly what it's done. It's put a curve into what was a flat panel. because you're shrinking the distance there. So perhaps if you did it on both edges, it might work, but yeah, that's kind of more what I expected to have happen. Was if you keep doing it, it'll curve the flat. But no, this is working pretty well. One other quick thing, when I was poking around with the lathe, because I had to set up the change gears, because the last time I used it, it was set up for thread cutting. I can't even remember what thread, so I had to set it back to normal to get the normal carriage travel. It's a real pain in the neck on this machine. It's quite hard to follow and get the setup exactly right. Every time I have to do it, I always think, oh, I should upgrade to a proper lathe with a gearbox. But when I was going through my box of gears, I found these. And what these were some of my prototypes for the central bonnet hinge for the Austin 7. And I'm going to do the same type of hinge for the Riley. And the way this works is that goes on a central shaft down the middle, and you sort of alternate them like this all the way down. And that little curved lip, what you do is you curve the edge of the bonnet that way, and so these slide down onto the bonnet panel, and it sort of holds it all together. And these were just made from some galvanized steel, and I actually had a little jig that I used to make these, but I can't remember exactly how it worked, and it got sort of lent to various people. I don't know how many people have used it now. Somebody will have it somewhere, hopefully, but I'm sure I can remember more or less how it worked and make another one. It had two metal plates and sort of a bolt that went through. Yeah, I'd have to figure it out again. But with some careful measuring, you can sort of mass produce these. I mean, you only need enough to do the bonnet, which on the Austin 7, so this is them there, and there's the brass rod. I may, if I can get some stainless steel the right width, or get some cut, I might make them from stainless steel, which might be nicer. But, yeah, that was good to find those so I could remember exactly how they worked. Very useful. Also, just for the bead roller, not the bead roller, the shrinker stretcher, looking through another drawer, I found 4 rubber feet, so I can reuse those. And I found tube plugs for the square tube feet. Of course, I only had 2 of them. I suspect they come in packets of 8 or 6, and I actually used a couple to make a stand for our television inside the house. That's why I've got those, because I made that from that square steel tube as well, so I've got some left over. So I'll have to get some more 1-inch square bungs next time I'm at the hardware shop. But apart from those and the springs, pretty much the rest of it was free. It was all just stuff I had lying around, which was good.